Start bench cut. Man, gotta get New York Liberty. L. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gotta Get Up podcast. This is a podcast about the New York Liberty and for New York Liberty fans, but it's also about the WNBA. So welcome, welcome, welcome. If this is your first time watching Gotta Get Up, thank you so much for tuning in to Sports Talk with ELA, where I house this podcast and a lot of others. So go check everything out on the channel. Subscribe up here somewhere. But if you want to catch up on Gotta Get Up, click this link right here. I have had Kia Clark. She is the Chief Operating Officer of the New York Liberty on the podcast to talk about Juneteenth. I've had the amazing Ari Chambers on the podcast to talk about her days as a member of the Torch Patrol, and she is the inspiration in part to the name Gotta Get Up, which comes from a New York Liberty theme song. You'll hear more about that in this episode. And I also had a great conversation in episode 3 with Bria Felician and Kelsey Trainer. We talked more broadly about the WNBA, but I also asked them to talk about the rookie sensation that is the New York Liberty, and we will talk a little bit more, and you will hear from Walt Hopkins, head coach Walt Hopkins, and some specific New York Liberty rookies in this episode. But let's get into the episode. Starting this week, all teams are having their virtual media day. And wouldn't you know, New York got things started first. I'm going to have some more content coming from Media Day. It is a massive file. We were on Zoom for 3 hours talking to every single player as well as Coach Walt Hopkins. So that coverage from Media Day is coming. I want to synthesize some of it for you and package it in a really fun way. So stay tuned. More of that coming on Gotta Get Up and also on Sports Talk with ELA. But what we do know is before Media Day, we learned that Megan Walker, rookie Megan Walker, did not travel to Florida with the team. Megan Walker tested positive for coronavirus and is currently in quarantine. And once she tests negative 2 times for coronavirus, she can join the team in Florida and then go into quarantine once again upon arriving at IMG Academy. Now, I want to break down exactly what's happening here. Now, when we got the news of Asia Durr tested positive for coronavirus and was symptomatic and was on a road to recovery, per Durr herself and in her public statement, from coronavirus. Thus, when she tested positive for coronavirus, she made the choice to not come to Florida. From what I understand, Asia Durr is in the process of trying to be cleared as a medical exemption. She's already had coronavirus, has opted out of the season, and now the Liberty and Durr are waiting, from what I understand, to learn if she will be a medical exemption. Now, why is that important? That's important because that means Asia will still be paid for the season. If she opts out, well, she already has opted out, but if she's not medically exempt, then she will not be paid her full salary. Now, that's counter to what we're seeing in the National Women's Soccer League, where players, regardless of if they were high risk or just weren't mentally, physically, or emotionally prepared for a single site season amid a worldwide pandemic and conversations of racism and social justice, players were able to opt out, and the NWSLPA negotiated that those players would get their full salary regardless of the reason they did not show up to their single site, which is in Utah. That is not the case from what we understand in the WNBA. In the WNBA, players will only receive their full salary if they are medically exempt. So you have some players that are being suspended. They've decided not to travel overseas, for example, in the case of the New York Liberty. Now, that also matters to the team because if those players are either suspended or are opt out, such as like a Natasha Cloud to focus on social justice, or they're if they opt out and they are not on the roster, then they are not part of the salary cap. Now, a medical exemption is different. So in the case of Asia Dur, if she is medically exempt, she will still be paid for the season, and thus that money, her salary, counts towards the New York Liberty team salary cap. So although they technically have roster space left, they won't have salary cap, as much salary cap to work with. And we're really seeing this could be huge for the Washington Mystics, who just yesterday it was reported that the independent group of physicians that was reviewing Elena Delle Donne's case, they denied her claim to be medically exempt for the 2020 season. Elena Delle Donne has been very open with her history with Lyme disease. And the Elena Delle Donne's personal physicians have deemed her high risk. However, the group of physicians that reviewed her case, and this is a group of physicians and a panel of physicians that were brought together by the WNBPA, the union, the Players Association, and the league offices. This panel has found that she does not qualify for a medical exemption. Now, why does that matter? Again, because if she is not medically exempt, then that means if she does not report to Florida, she is essentially opting out for non-medical reasons and will not be paid her salary. Now, that matters to Elena Delle Donne because, well, that's her money, that's her job, that's her income. And it matters to the Washington Mystics because if she has already not been cleared for medical exemption, which means that the Washington Mystics are not on the hook for her salary if she doesn't show up. Does this sound confusing? It's a little bit confusing, but it's important to understand because essentially players are not going to be paid if they don't show up and have not already been medically cleared. This is not what we're seeing in the National Women's Soccer League. And I think part of the reason could be because the National Women's Soccer League, and I'll put some of the links in the description, but the National Women's Soccer League, before getting started, and one of the primary reasons that they were able to get started is because they applied for some of the government money for businesses. And that money has been able, along with some key partners such as Secret and Google. Shout out to Google. I record on Google. Open to partnership. I'm just saying. Think that will come up in my SEO that I should give a shout out to Google. You got to put it out there. I'm putting it out there in the universe. Anyway, those partners and sponsors, along with that money that they were able to get from a government fund, which could go to paying salaries, is precisely why, in part, the NWSL was able to negotiate with the Players Association that a player, regardless of why they opt out, no questions asked, will be paid their full salary. The WNBA does not have that agreement. So that's what we're seeing play out. So Elena Delle Donne, who knows? Will she report? Will she not report? And it's a tough decision now because if her physicians are saying that her immune system is compromised because of pre-existing conditions, is she going to want to take that chance? Because let's not get it twisted, folks. Everyone entering that bubble, player or otherwise, is putting their health at risk. Another thing I want to go into before we talk a little bit about what happened at Media Day and some of the rookies. There are things called false negative and false positive tests. Now, we had heard that 7 players tested positive for coronavirus. Around that time, different sources were telling me that there might have also been false negative tests. So what's a false negative test? A false negative test is I go in, I do either like the spit test or the swab test, and my test comes up negative. I'm like, boom, cool. I'm going to travel, quarantine with my team. Then eventually I'm going to go to the bubble and I'll be in the Wubble and I'm ready to go. However, after several tests, there have been times where a player who's tested negative multiple times then tests positive for coronavirus. So one, our bubbles are not airtight. And there are people that are asymptomatic, but that's why they try to do the testing daily. But now there's a question of if the testing is accurate. As I understand, there are 3 different types of tests. There's the like deep up in there, like touch your brain type swab. And then there's kind of like a throat situation where it doesn't go as deep, like a throat swab. And then there's a spit test. However, these tests are relatively new. Coronavirus, we're still learning a lot about. And my understanding is that the tests are not always accurate. So you can have, and it's not unusual to have false negative tests where you test negative, you test negative, you test negative, and then all of a sudden you'll test positive without necessarily being introduced to coronavirus. But they're also false positive tests. So you go in and you test positive and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to quarantine. I have to stay away from people. I have coronavirus. Like all of this is happening. And then it turns out that maybe, sorry, false alarm. That's what happened in the NWSL. An entire team had multiple players that tested positive for coronavirus. They opted out of the tournament, only to days later find that a number of those tests, after just a few days, were negative. False positive, false negative, going into a bubble, coming out of a bubble. This is anything but airtight, people. I just think it's important to have that context because a lot of people are going to say, and we're already seeing it, Skylar Diggins-Smith, she has been very conflicted. She said that in a media session I was in, and people are telling her, suck it up. If you don't want to be there, don't be there. This is complicated, folks. It's very complicated. And although my situation financially and with job security might not be what I want it to be, I'm filming this and I get to talk about the WNBA within the safety of this is literally my bedroom. Skylar Diggins-Smith doesn't have that. She didn't want to talk about what decision or how she went about making decisions on whether her family would travel with her to the Wubble, which is an option, but also comes at a risk to the people that are invited to the bubble, as well as everyone in the bubble themselves because of the false positive and false negative tests. This is far from simple. This is far from a situation where we should be telling grown athletes to suck it up, because let's keep it real. They are returning to play for our entertainment. And if we want to be serious about bringing sports back, then we need to be serious. Where's my, it's over. Oh dear. It's over there. We need to be serious about wearing our masks. We need to be serious about washing our hands and using hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipes and all of that stuff. Like we need to be serious because these players are putting their health at risk. They always do. Also, let's not get that twisted. They always do. But this is an unknown. And in the WNBA, we're seeing that unknown could come into play for someone like Elena Deladon. And what is the league going to do about that? We don't know. Whew. Okay, I had to unload some of that. We're going to move on. Before I get to my next segment called New York City, I think you're going to like this one. I want to do a little bit of a gotta get up fast break. So there are a number of players that are in the league this season that have played at one time for the New York Liberty. And I caught up with one of them, Essence Carson. She's now with the Washington Mystics. And this segment is the gotta get up fast break. And I played a nice round of start bench cut with Essence Carson.
Thank you. Essence, Erica here. Actually hoping that you'll indulge me with a New York Liberty specific question. It's a fun question of start bench cut. So your three things are the Liberty Torch pyrotechnics, the Gotta Get Up theme song, or Maddie the mascot. Yeah, gotta get up. Start bench cut.
Start bench cut. Man, gotta get up. New York Liberty. Okay. All right, so we're gonna cut the pyrotechnics. All right, that's just, we don't necessarily need that. It's nice to have.
Fair.
Dang. We gotta start Maddie. You gotta start Maddie. Like it's you have to. I mean, I guess you could bench the song a little bit. I don't know. Actually, that song. Nah, yeah, you gotta start Maddie. That'd be disrespectful. If I bench Maddie, you could bench the song.
All right, so cutting pyro though for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't think New Yorkers really care about the pyro.
Fair enough. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Essence, for playing along. But that's not the only person that I asked. I also asked Amanda Zahui B. Let's hear what she said for her start bench cut.
Maddie gonna be mad. We starting with the fire.
Okay.
We gotta.
Okay.
We bench Maddie. And yeah.
And you're getting rid of the song?
I'm not saying it, but yeah.
Zahui, man, she hurt my heart there. She didn't officially say it, folks, but she's getting rid of Gotta Get Up. As Howard McDowell and Ari Chambers said to me on Twitter, she had some problems benching Maddie, but ultimately Zaui's going with the pyro. Very interesting choice. I'm curious to see what other players who have been on the New York Liberty are going to say. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I was there for the full 3 hours of New York Liberty Media Day. So we are going to have more coming from that throughout the season for Gotta Get Up. So in the next several episodes, and I'll also compile everything that you can find on Sports Talk with ELA. So make sure you're subscribed and you can turn on the notifications. So anytime I have a video, you'll get that. You'll get that first. But question of the day, question of the episode. What do you make of the WNBA situation now where players who are not medically cleared will not be paid, or players who opt out will not be paid? Let me know in the comments. Again, this is counter to what we're seeing in the NWSL, but any player who is not medically cleared for the 2020 season will not get her salary. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. But now let's get into the next segment, New York City. And I can't take credit for this. This was actually tweeted at me. There are, if we include Asia Durr, 3 members of the Lou on the New York Liberty roster. And so I asked them about this New York City. So I talked to Jazmine Jones and Kylee Shook. We talked a little bit about Jazmine in particular talked not just about the representation of Louisville on the New York Liberty, aka New York City, but also in the league. Talked about Angel McCautry. Then I talked to Kylee Shook and Jazmine Jones a little bit about, Jazmine in particular, about Breonna Taylor, and a member of the Louisville alumna that are in the WNBA, bringing Breonna Taylor into the Wubble in a very profound way.
I wanted to ask you about something that has made its way around social media. Instead of New York City, New York City, as in for, the L, Louisville. Obviously, we're missing someone from that contingency. But what do you think New York City will be able to bring to Florida this season?
It's gonna be interesting. Definitely is. But just like speaking of, it's a lot of Louisville alums here. Me, Kylie, and then Asia's mission this year. But then you got Maisha Hines Allen, you got Angel McCautry. So like Louisville is definitely putting on for the whole W actually. But definitely for New York, it's going to be an exciting season. I mean, definitely looking forward to it. The chemistry is definitely going to be there with me and Kylie, and we're definitely going to miss Asia this year.
I talked to Jazmine Jones about this earlier, but someone tweeted me when y'all were announced to the team and said it's not New York City, it's New York City, as in Louisville holding it down. Of course, Asia won't be with the team this year, but just your reactions to that and how excited are you to be able to have Louisville representation on this team and throughout the Wubble?
I mean, it feels great. Our fans have always been wonderful ever since I got to Louisville. They followed our journey since the beginning. So them following us here just feels even better, and them making that bold statement. I mean, it feels great, and it's great to have my teammates here as well. So in the next level, and knowing that we have people behind us just feels awesome.
And, I want to shift gears a little bit because another thing as far as Louisville being represented this year in the WNBA is obviously Breonna Taylor, and her name being a part of the Black Lives Matter and Say Her Name initiative that the WNBA is taking on. As someone who has spent time in Louisville and knows that community, I suppose, what has been your reaction to the conversation ongoing about getting justice for Breonna Taylor? And second, what were your reactions to being able to have Breonna Taylor, with the permission of her family, honored this WNBA season?
So first thing first, I think it's heartbreaking that no justice has not been here yet. It's been four months, I think. So it's very heartbreaking to see that her murderers are still out having freedom, and nothing has been done about it. So it's definitely heartbreaking, and just the honor to wear her name, to have her as our platform this year in the W, I think is very great. And shouts out to the players who made that happen. And I think it's going to be a great year for us to use our platform with sports in order to bring light to a certain situation.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Kylee, there's a greater conversation happening in this country, in the world, and something that the WNBA is taking on with respect to Black Lives Matter and social justice. I want to ask you, though, from being new to this league and being new to the Liberty, obviously, do you have any expectations, ways that you want to show up for these conversations, or things that you'd like to learn as these conversations move forward throughout the season?
Yeah, definitely. I know my teammates are all very involved with the movement, and so am I. Honestly, I've been trying to educate myself more on that, and by doing that, I'm listening to my teammates, what they think about it. And I mean, we're all from different areas, so it's kind of nice to see the aspect of every person. So how is this? How do you view this? So I feel like that's more so how I'm learning about it. And then the league, I feel like the league's doing a great job. We get emails practically every day during quarantine on how they're going to try to make the movement or help us or put the names on the back of our jerseys. Mainly just voting, seeing how people feel, seeing if people are okay, having Zoom calls. So I feel like they've definitely been taking steps to show that they care, and especially on our team, for sure. So I definitely want to learn more on that.
Taylor. For those who may not know, Breonna Taylor was shot and killed by law enforcement. Louisville has been in the process of revising no-knock warrants, and even has thought to name some of those policy changes after Breonna Taylor. That would be a thoughtful thing to do, except there have been no charges formally brought onto the officers who shot Breonna Taylor. It's an interesting is not the right word. It is a complicated series of circumstances, but there are a lot of people, including members of the Louisville women's basketball community, that are calling for justice for Breonna Taylor. I want to thank Kylee Shook. Spent 2 days with her in the media via media scrums. The first clip about New York City came from Media Day. So she's wearing the black jersey. Then you also see her the day before. That was her specific media day. This is what's going to be happening. So I'm going to be joining the New York Liberty media calls and other media calls so that we can have conversations about your favorite WNBA team, presumably your favorite WNBA team, the New York Liberty, past, present, and maybe future. All right, that's all for this episode of Gotta Get Up. I have already been in conversations with a few past and future guests about a fun watch party. Gonna close out this episode letting you know that the schedule is out, and ooh, is it gonna be juicy. The New York Liberty and the Seattle Storm. Technically, the Liberty are hosting the Storm, but I mean, they're all at the single site. So what is life even? But the New York Liberty will be the home team for the first game as the WNBA returns to play, and they will be taking on the Seattle Storm. Now, next episode, I'm going to get into a little bit of the controversy and drama that I am so ready for when it comes to how this is going to be billed. And we already know it's Sabrina Ionescu versus Sue Bird.